Step number 3, the storage chest end panels. Now, we've already done our framework, which is our rails and stiles, and some of you have chosen for the inside frame to be a different type of wood. If that's true, you need to make sure you do that different type of wood for this step, number 3. So I've done cherry for my rails and stiles, and I've chosen to do maple for my inside panel. So I'm grabbing some maple boards for that. And I've already glued this up to save some time, but step number 1 through 5 just explains how to glue boards together again in case you forgot. Making sure you have a jointed edge when they glue together, making sure when you glue these that you have clamps on bottom and on top, and you alternate those. And how long do we leave the clamps on at least?
30 minutes.
At least 30 minutes, right? To let that glue fully dry. These clamps have been on longer than 30 minutes. They're fine. We can take those off. After they're glued up and dried, it says we need to take a glue scraper, remove any excess glue that's on them. So we'll do that quickly. We've got a glue scraper here, and you notice our glue line there. We want to get that scraped off. A lot of pressure on that glue scraper. Scrape that glue off the best you can. Again, if you don't get all of it, that's fine. Just get most of it off. Try to scrape some of that off. We've got to get both faces, the glue off both faces on this. So let's see how this other face looks. We got a little bit of glue there. This to the bench, it might be a little bit easier to get that glue off there. Scrape that glue off. Now if you wipe off the glue, you should be fine without having to scrape it if you took some time to wipe it off when it was still wet. There we go. Looks good. Next. So again, all we've done so far is getting a board cut to 20 inches long, 2 of them joined to the edge and glued them together. We're going to get both the panels out of this one board. So we have two of these little frameworks here. We're going to get this panel and this panel all cut out of this one board here that we've glued up. That's why it's a little bit longer than when we made that. It says, after the glue's dried, scrape it. We did that. Next, number 7, use the planer to plane your board down to 13/16 of an inch thick. You should know how to use the planer already, but if you're having trouble with it, let me know, call me over. We need to get this thing planed down. We did not plane it down beforehand. We glued them up when they were still thick. They're about 15/16 of an inch thick originally. We glued them together. Now we're going to plane them down to 13/16. So head on over to the planer. Go ahead. Okay, now my boards were about 15/16 thick, so I first set it to 14/16. If yours are a little bit thicker, you might want to just go 1/16 smaller in how thick they are. Get this turned on, send them through. We want to go down to 13/16. Okay, we'll turn it 1 full turn. Flip that board over, get the other face. Should be 13/16. Don't go smaller than 13/16. Just that same thickness that we needed there. Okay? Next, we're going to go over to the jointer. We got to joint the edge. These edges right now, you may have already jointed them, but I still want you to joint it again to guarantee that it's flat. These ones have not been jointed. Just joint one edge until flat on the jointer. So head over to the jointer. Do I have to use push sticks?
No.
No, it's a lot taller than that fence. Don't use the push sticks. Just your hands, nice and tight. Don't let that rock at all. Nice and tight. Go slow. I'm going to run that one more time. I missed a spot right up there at the front. Now we just got one edge nice and jointed. Again, you guys should know how to do the jointer. Next, go to the table saw. Rip your board to width of 8 7/8. So let's do this on the table saw. Alright, 8 7/8. Do I have to use a push stick if my fence is set at 8 7/8? No, you don't. You can just use your hand now if you want to push this through. If you feel more comfortable using a push stick, go ahead, you can use a push stick, but anything more than 6 inches, you don't need a push stick. Our blade height, I think we're pretty good, or a little high, just lower just a little bit. 8 7/8. Now be sure you're right on, 8 7/8. Jointed edge against that fence, you do not need a push stick, we can just use our hands. Alright, next it says use the panel saw to trim one end of your board flat, cutting about 1/4 inch off one end. Hold or clamp your board tight against the fence. So far all we've done is we've planed the face, jointed an edge, table saw on the other edge. Now we've got to get this end here cut, nice and clean. Normally we'd go to the miter saw or something like that to cut this, but I'm going to have you guys use a panel saw on this. I want you to have more practice on the panel saw. We're going to go and trim one end, about 1/4 inch off one end of that board, just a little bit, and trim that little bit off on the panel saw. Head on over to the panel saw. Okay, remember on the panel saw, where the blade cuts is the end of the tape measure. I find it's easy to use this middle shelf here to put your board on. If you want to have your board on the lower shelf, you can do that as well, but up here is fine. And I'm just going to push that over so it's just a little bit hanging over where the blade's going to cut. We want to make sure your board's held nice and tight, or you can clamp it. I'm just going to hold it with one hand and pull the saw down with the other, and that's fine too. These two handles, just a reminder, push those in all the ways to get that blade to stick out. Put that switch, we'll just trim one little end off. Pull it away, we should be good. We just got one end nice and flat, 90 degrees to our edge there. Okay. Okay, next, after you've done the panel saw and trim one end flat, it says go to the table saw to cross cut your board into 2 boards each 8.5 inches long. Set the fence to 8.5. Have the end you just cut on the panel saw go against the fence. We're doing a cross cut. Remember, a cross cut is cutting across the grain. Normally, we use the table saw just for the rip cuts, and that's going with the grain. We can actually do a cross cut on the table saw if your board is big enough to fit on that fence where it's not going to rock or tip on you too much. Okay? Normally we use the miter saw or the radial arm saw to do these cross cuts, but I want you guys to be able to get some practice cross cutting on a table saw. We cannot do this cross cut if you've got a board that's pretty narrow. You can't take your board like this and do a cross cut safely like that. No. Okay? We can do a cross cut on this because we've got a little bit more board to work with, and we're having that end that we cut on the panel saw up against that fence here. And we want to set our fence to 8.5. So be sure that you actually look and get your fence set right at 8.5, because we're going to get 2 panels out of this. You've got to keep it tight on that fence. If this board tries to move away from that fence at all, like that or this, you're going to have that kickback happen. So you've got to have it real close, nice, tight on that fence here. Do I have to use a push stick?
Yes.
It's more than 6 inches, so no, you do not. And I actually don't want you to use a push stick because you can control it a lot tighter on the fence with just your hand. Just obviously don't put your hand in front of the blade, so out of the way here. 8.5, flat end against the fence, nice and tight on that fence. Of these. We got one, we're going to get a second one out of that same block, that leftover. Okay. So we should have 2 of these panels. They're 8 7/8 wide and 8.5 inches long. So they're different. It's not square. So one direction it's 8 7/8, the other is 8.5. Should have 2 of them. Okay. After we've cut these panels, we're going to come over to the shaper table here, and we're going to use another shaper, the panel cutter shaper. And then we're going to take this panel, we're going to do a design all the way around it so it can fit inside your framework here. It says mark an X on your best face. Again, we're just choosing which face we want people to see. And if they both look great, it doesn't really matter, but go ahead and make a decision on which face you want people to see. Maybe I like that face a little better. This one here, I like that face, that's pretty good. Just mark an X on your best looking face. It says use the panel cutter shaper to shape the raised panel design all the way around each board. Do the end grain first. And this is very important. Remember, it's just like a router. It's doing a design around your board. You want to do the end grain first. That's where you can see the rings of the tree. Because when you're shaping or routing the end grain, it usually tears off a little chunk off the end there. Then after you do the edge grain, it's going to clean that up. So definitely do the end of your boards first, and then we'll get the edges. X down. And again, we're going to use a power feed to help pull our boards through. Just go on the slow speed, don't go on fast. Turning it on here.
There's a block right there.
And let's clear all the stuff out of the way. Thank you. Let's get the dust collection turned on, definitely on this one. We'll turn it on. And I have a little push stick that'll help you push this through. It's kind of designed to help push this board through, so you don't have to get your hand underneath this when you turn it on. X down, end grain first, right up against there, get the push stick on there, and you can just use this push stick to help push it through. If you look at the front side here, it's got quite a bit cut off. We got to get the other end grain, but absolutely make sure that X goes down every time. Really pay attention for that. Use that push stick to help push it. Okay, now that we've done both end grains, now we've got to get the edges. X down. One more edge. Okay, now we've got our panel all shaped all the way around there. This should fit in our framework. You're going to have to do the same exact thing to this other one, X down, end grain first, and get both of them shaped on the shaper here. Okay, now once we've got both the panels shaped on the router, or on the shaper, we want it, number 14, it says dry assemble your two end panels with the rail stiles and panels. Don't glue them yet, and then make sure your name's on everything. We just want to see if it fits, if we need to change anything on this. Do not glue anything yet. I can't stress that enough. Just putting it together with no glue. And so all I want you to do is just kind of take your frame and pull it apart here. It's also very important that the grain direction is up and down. So you've got the grain, the lines, we want those to go up and down, not side to side when we put this together. Your stiles are up and down, they're vertical, so your grain on your panel needs to be the same way your stiles go. If you put it this way, horizontal, it's not going to fit together. So we want to have it be vertical on this when we put this together. And there's really, sometimes it's hard to put this together, sometimes it goes together real nice and easy. We'll see. Hopefully this works. You're just going to slide this together with that panel inside there. I would do your rails before you get the second stile on there and just kind of force things in there gently. You don't want to break anything here, so sometimes you have to kind of push things around a little bit, and if you need to, you can get some motivation. Get one of these dead blow hammers and you can just tap on it, get a little extra motivation, and that helps put it in there. Line these up, get everything matched up nice, extra motivation just to put that together. You'll notice there's a couple little feet on the bottom, and that's fine. We want this thing flush on top, we want the panel nice and tight in there, and then these are going to stick out. It's okay, we're going to trim everything off later. We just want to fit this all together, both of them. And I like to even just really tap on these, make sure everything's nice and tight and fit. And it's really pretty solid with no glue, but I still want you to do not glue this yet. Let's just get both of these fit together. Get your name on it all over. It's on here, but I'm still going to write my name on everything. So once you get them both put together, get my signature. We'll turn that in, and that's step 3. Go ahead.